Talk Show.
Recorded live.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to the Genesis Science Fiction Radio Show, a service of the blacksci-fi website. Today is December 11th, 2015. My name is William Hayashi. I'm your host for tonight. And tonight's special guest is actually somebody who I just got through saying lives within almost a stone's throw of my home, Ced Pharaoh, and photographer, writer, just person extraordinaire, and obviously a quality individual because he does hail from one of the better cities in the United States. Good evening, Ced. How you doing, man?
Good. How are you doing? Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. And I'll tell you what's been the coolest part about, like, right now. I don't know how everybody else is faring around the country, but here in Chicago, it's been in the 50s, like, forever. Yeah. And we don't normally get this in December. And nobody's complaining. Nobody's, talking loud about it because it could change at any minute.
That's
but
right.
I would say we've been pretty lucky. What about you?
Absolutely, man. This is a blessing. This is like Indian summer for real in Chicago. I mean, it's just normally never this temperature. I'm sorry. It is amazing that we get Indian summer, given how bad we've treated them. Not us, black folks, but how the country has treated them. I'm surprised that they still share Indian summer with us, rather than wishing something, So anyway, you grew up around where I grew up. You're probably a lot younger than me, but it's kind of good talking to someone from the area. Before we started the recording, you were telling me where did you mostly grow up? You did your elementary school and high school. Yeah, I mostly grew up on the west side of Chicago, North Lawndale. I went to a school called Paderewski, which is no longer there. And then I went to high school on the south side in Hyde Park Career Academy.
And which actually was a rival school to my school, Kenwood High School. But not a rival. I'm sorry?
Yes, it's definitely Kenwood was a rival, definitely. Definitely.
But not a vicious rival. We weren't like fighting with each other and stuff like that. As a matter of fact, both of those schools have had some pretty cool notables gone through there. My mother actually went to Hyde Park High. And in her class was like Lou Rawls during that era. So
Herbie Hancock went there. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, definitely.
We had Chaka Khan.
Right, exactly. Yeah, one of my favorite singers.
Although I have one bragging right that you don't have. The old TV show from, I think, the 70s. 70s or maybe late 60s. Room 222.
Yeah.
That was actually out of our school. They came and they got all kinds of stories about us, and all our dirty laundry was out there on the TV screen through that period of time, because we were like the only really racially mixed school that did not have fights all the time, didn't have race riots. We didn't have gang problems. The gangs left Kenwood alone for whatever reason, and we even knew who was in the gangs in our school.
Wow.
But it was different, back in the late 60s, early 70s. And so when you're going to school, Lawndale, I know Lawndale as well. As I mentioned to you earlier, I take care of a school over there, all of the technical stuff for a school that was just built there 8 years ago.
Right.
And Lawndale's a great community. It's doing a lot of very cool things. There's been a decent amount, or there was a decent amount of gentrification money that was spent in Lawndale, but it's still, like the phone company doesn't care about the wiring over there and stuff like that because it's not considered a high-ticket area. They don't have a lot of wealthy people living there. But, it's folks. It's just folks. It's regular people. Like the school is a K-8 school. So, and they've got a great community center and things like that. When you were growing up there, tell us a little bit about how the neighborhood was.
Wow, it's amazing as a resident of North Lawndale. Especially during the time, as a resident in terms of during the time that I was
coming up, it was a beautiful place in terms of the people. Yes, there were gang problems, and crime, but it wasn't as blown out of proportion, I would say, as a lot of people would think. My particular section really was dominated by, if you go south as far as maybe Cermak or 23rd Street, as far north, say like Roosevelt, as far east as Western, and as far west, I would say as almost Cicero. I mean, there was a crime. It was community. It was an old-fashioned community. It was it was still the older generation, so people looked out for each other. I remember I can leave off my block without some neighbor calling my auntie saying, "Hey, Ced is he's gone too far off the block," that kind of thing. So it was community policing before it was called community policing.
Right.
Neighbors looked out for each other. I mean, I remember there's so many things about North London that were jewels and gems for me. I mean, my first business was like a paperboy. Actual paperboy. Taking care of the elders and the seniors on the block. Going to get their papers like every week. And I'll get paid in advance, that type of thing, 2 weeks in advance. And we'll deliver the papers for the next 2 weeks. And the entrepreneurship of North Lawndale. I mean, every other block, there was a mom and pop store. It was a gentleman who had a laundromat, and he was one of the first people in North Lawndale, to my knowledge, that when the lotto came out, that he got a lotto machine in his business.
Yeah, that's highly political in Illinois.
Right, exactly.
Getting a lotto machine, yeah.
Right, and George's Music Room, one of the greatest independent retailers of music in the U.S. He's in North Lawndale. Barney's Music Room. Who was Barney's no longer alive, but he was like, he had a one-stop, one of the most famous one-stops in Chicago. Another entrepreneur, they was very entrepreneur-heavy in North Lawndale, very inspirational to me, seeing these black people, men and women, owning businesses. So even though it wasn't like large-ticket companies in the area, right. I mean, it was. We rarely went to the store to get fruits and vegetables. I mean, it's community gardening now, but there's always been community gardens in North Lawndale. So, it's a big thing in Chicago now, but it was fun times. It was fun times. I mean, it was some heartache and things of that nature. But
you had that great anchor there. You had a great anchor there because you had the Sears catalog house operation.
That's right.
Sears' national catalog operation was in northeast Lawndale. Right there on Arlington. The original Sears Tower. People know the Sears Tower. They call it the Willis Tower now, but I'm never going to call it the Willis Tower. But the original Sears Tower is 14 stories. Right. And it's still standing over there. They just did a huge remodel of the whole place. They put in a new parking lot. And I get to watch that for the last 2 years because it's right next to the school that I do my volunteering at. So, and that's the other thing. People way back when weren't aware of the fact that Lawndale was basically a middle-class community.
Exactly.
Because middle-class blacks don't exist. We don't exist somehow.
And
so, and so that was something back then. And then, what kind of, given the fact that, you're pretty creative, you do a few things, just a couple of things, the writing and the photography are, those are not what you consider, well, they're certainly kind of like, I don't want to say intellectual pursuits, but they're not, it's not, they're kind of unusual. You don't think in terms of those automatically coming out of the West Side. Oh, yes, one of the West Side's most notable writers of many, many, many writers is, Ced Pharaoh. Right. So it's kind of cool. Now, when you were growing up, did you have that kind of creative bent where you were,
where you thought about writing, or were you getting into like the TV shows and the movies that affected all of us who write in this genre?
Definitely. I think I was raised in North London by my great aunt, and my great grandmother, and her son, my grandfather. So I was raised in a house of elders, which definitely grounded me in terms of a worldview, in terms of the potential, in terms of history from the South, because they came from the South. And they kept me stable. They kept me on the right and narrow in terms of knowing right from wrong and not doing the wrong things. So I was a nerd. I was a nerd, intellectual nerd, bookworm. So definitely I grew up on the shows I used to watch. We had one television, so that was so whatever they watched is what I watched, and just learning about the history. I think that's the basic thing for me in terms of the foundations, that listening to their old stories from the South, what they had to go through, just recently. I mean, at the time I was, anyway from the age of 6, 7, 8, listening to their stories, which really wasn't that long ago at that time.
Right.
Of racism, men and women, especially men, being attacked for whistling at a white woman. Those stories grounded. So when you're watching television, I would always compare those stories that they would tell me versus what I would see on television. And there was nothing more, what's the word I'm looking for, authentic than what they were telling me, because they were there. They were eyewitnesses. They were participants. And because of that, I noticed visually the lack of black characters on television or in movies.
Right.
Outside of certain types of characters. So then you go into like the reading. I used to read everything. It's science fiction, mysteries, Ellery Queen, Encyclopedia Brown, et cetera. And it was always that lack. Using their stories as a foundation, I always noticed that there was always a lack of people, of characters that represented myself or my family or my friends in most of the stories. So that kind of really prompted me to start writing stories early, because I didn't see myself in any of those things. Poetry came easy, poetry is like a little bit more fluid, a little bit more loose, less structure. So I was really into the different poets that came out during that time, older poets. Let's see here. Wow, I'm drawing a blank, but the writings of Baldwin, Nikki Giovanni. Nikki Giovanni is my favorite poet.
Langston Hughes, yeah.
Langston Hughes,
okay.
So I grew up reading those type of books and stories, and of course comic books. But always using the original stories that I was taught by my aunts, my great aunt and her sister, in terms of the experiences of black people. Never really was translated into what I was reading or watching.
Right.
So yes, I watched, enjoyed it, but there was always something missing. So that's when I started to write my own poetry books, short stories. I remember my brother and I, we got together and started creating our own comic book idea, a universe. And these characters that we drew, that we wrote about, were far more diverse than what's out there now, but they were definitely black characters, looking magnificent, looking heroic, etc. So
now, when you were doing this, you were school aged.
School age, yeah, grammar school. I was in Paderewski. Paderewski, predominantly black school. The teachers, 90% were black. There were male teachers as well. So there was a strong sense of history connection with them as well, because they had gone through things too as teachers, as black teachers, come from different parts of Chicago and different parts of the United States.
The reason why I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, the reason why I asked was I was wondering what kind of encouragement you might have had from your teachers? You know, did they know that you were writing?
Yes. It was great. I think because they were black teachers and they knew.
Okay.
I think the importance of having black mentors and teachers.
Mm-hmm.
They understand. They have a greater sensitivity in terms of what may motivate an individual, or what may inspire another individual. So these teachers, they didn't teach across the board one type of style. They identified the needs of each student, and kind of tailor-made their approach. So in my regards, I was a good student. I was a no-problem student, really. No fights and things. I had good grades, so I would be involved in doing like a lot of art projects, in terms of doing posters. Definitely participating in all the writing curriculum they had. So yeah, they definitely encouraged that.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And then, you know, you, the two of you were writing together or collaborating, or were you kind of a little bit competitive, seeing who could come up with the best stuff?
Well,
go ahead.
Well, in terms of my brother, well, I live separate from my brothers. I'm the second of seven.
Okay.
So I would visit them, of course, the summer or whatever the case is. But when I was alone, so to speak, on the West Side, I had friends and things like that. Sports are part of the everyday life, playing games. But artistically, being an artist can be a lonely type of endeavor. And for me, it was a release. It was a way to really express things that I was feeling, things that I was seeing. Photography came into play a little bit later, completely by accident, because my aunt, being that they were already very older, up in age, so they couldn't attend the functions. So they would give me cameras. They'll take some pictures of the family, of the events, and bring them back, because they couldn't participate, because sometimes they would be too tired or too sick to really venture out.
Mm-hmm.
I remember I would get this is back in the day of film, 110 film camera, and I would get this, they would develop the film, and they would say, hey, I said, okay, I just developed all this film, and said, I had to tell you something. This is a whole bunch of nothing. Because I would just shoot. Right. Man. I mean, my auntie, she was so direct. I loved her to death. She, in a very large sense, taught me composition. In terms of making each shot count, making each shot say something. In terms of looking or zooming in on a specific subject versus just shooting a wide angle of anything. Kind of zooming in on a specific person or a specific object that kind of represented whatever the scene was. So she helped me in terms of composition, even though she wasn't a photographer. So, she was definitely an inspiration in terms of that. Plus, this is back in the day of Ebony and Jet. Ebony was a once-a-month publication. Jet came every week.
Mm-hmm.
And looking at those publications, and looking back, I always say to myself, those publications really showed me the strength of the black culture, because during that time, those two publications really highlighted black culture more than any other medium at that time.
Sure.
Visually. Outside of, of course, the Channel 11, they're reaching out for money so they would show the poor African family and kids, or some black individual that was caught up in a crime. Outside of those images or comedic images, there were never any images of royalty, that spoke to history in a positive sense.
Right.
So Ebony and Jet was definitely a source. I credit my aunt and my great-grandmother for having those publications coming to the house every week, So that really kind of pushed me in terms of the photography aspect, capturing life as is, as a history component, to look back.
Mm-hmm. Almost like a documentarian.
Right. Yes.
For the time.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I mean, so you got both of these things going on at the same time, right?
Yes.
That's pretty remarkable, and we're talking about, you know, late elementary school, high school. You were definitely embedded in both of, you know, you were both writing and shooting, right?
Right, exactly. And I think it's during the time of was it high school? I think it was high school. And of course, I would shoot different events in terms of different field trips, et cetera, et cetera. I don't think I really got paid. I was actually offered to be paid as a photographer. I was attending an event. I believe it was late high school. I was attending an event down in downtown Chicago at a hotel. It's a music industry event. I have no idea how I got there. I think a friend of mine, Ken Walker, who was a musician, he got me passes. And there was a record company having a special event there. I had my camera. It was a manual camera,
right.
Ced Pharaoh, and I'm just snapping away. This guy walks up to me, white guy, says, "Excuse me." I said, "Yes." He said, "Are you a photographer?" I looked down at my camera, looked at him, and said, "Yes." He said, "Well, here's my business card. I like to have, you know, pictures of my artists that you've taken. If you can send that to me, then we can work out payment arrangements."
Okay.
I said, "Sure." So that's kind of how I fell into using photography as a way to make money, but also gain connections and gain more confidence in terms of my art. And then that's kind of fell into like helping smaller businesses eventually with their business needs in terms of media releases or correspondence letters, et cetera, in terms of marketing services. But that came much later.
And okay, so I mean, it sounds like you were pretty much on track, and at the same time, kind of what level was your writing at? You know, when you were going through high school, did you, you know, were you writing short stories? Did you have? I mean, I know that you were enthusiastic about writing something about us. You know, writing something that reflected an experience that you certainly didn't see on TV, and back then there. How many books were there that had black characters? Not that many. So
right, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
And,
this is true.
And so that propelled you. I mean, how did that affect you growing, you know, through your teens and you know, that awareness of self and that awareness of you know, fitting in the universe and things like that? How did that go?
Well, again, leaning on the shoulders of previous artists. Like again,
right.
Looking at their art and understanding, you know, why they wrote what they were writing, and trying to understand, and also reading about what inspired them to write and to continue to write or to continue to create if they were visual artists. Mr. Brown, he was a 7th grade teacher of mine at Paderewski on the west side. He said one of the most important things you can do is show the world who you are and who you want to be.
And
at the time, it, you know, kind of went over my head. Kind of went over my head a little bit at the time he said it, but as I was going through life, I started to realize that, you know, this is how you live in life is, and what you put out and what you lead is important. No matter how large or small it is, it has nothing to do with dollar amount, but I think in terms of, for me, spiritually, it was a way to connect with the universe by being creative. Now, whether someone was really going to care to pay money for that was neither here nor there. I think I just wanted to create. So I always wrote poems and poetry. And then with hip-hop, you know, I would you know, write rhymes and try to battle people just in terms of expression, being expressive, to be heard in some way, to be recognized, to leave a vestige at some point in time. You know, that I was here, that I had something to say, and then my potential was of value. It wasn't until like the poetry scene in Chicago came about that I even attempted to get on the stage to perform poetry. But I did that a few times at different black bookstores around Chicago, and it was great. It was great, just being around that culture. I was always seeking out circles of creativity to feed that creative fire. Back in London, it was kind of sparse. so I had to venture out of North Lawndale and travel to the south side, travel downtown, travel up north to really find those enclaves of creativity that matched what I was trying to do.
And even a venue. I mean, sometimes it was hard to just find the right venue, because, of course,
absolutely,
nobody was catering to us at all. Now, of course, urban culture pretty much dominates the world. And I know that pisses people off to hear that, but well, there's a life to it, there's a depth to it, and there is an emotional component that you just don't find in very many other cultures. People go, oh, well, what about what's going on in the Middle East? Well, I don't know a single Middle Eastern rapper. Okay.
Right. Right.
I know some annoying Japanese little girl rappers, but man, those guys, their voices kill me, man. They kill me. But you see what I'm saying? It wasn't until fairly recently, let's say the last generation, where they quit fighting it. They quit fighting the fact that the whole world, the leading edge of a cultural phenomenon, skewed urban.
Right. Once they learned there was a dollar amount that they could attach to and obtain rather quickly, it became viable. It became viable, for the bottom line, which hurt actually the creative energy and the spirit of. It's in some ways initially there's a lot of talented artists, writers that really didn't get the recognition they could have because they got swept under the rug underneath the aspirations of corporate dollars. But once it became viable, once they recognized it was viable, it was undeniable. They had to get in on it. So, but the writing was always key, and and then going to bookstores for the limited amount of bookstores. There was a few at the time. I could count off maybe 4 black bookstores I used to kind of venture to on a regular basis.
Did you ever get out to Easy Books out in Lincoln, way out south? Yeah.
Yeah, that bookstore, Africa West was a bookstore actually in North London. Well, not North London. It was like Madison and Kedzie.
Right.
After out in Oak Park, Frontline, which is on the south side of Chicago. Right. And just again, I'm just always seeking out those different meccas of creativity in black history, because outside of the Paderewski and the Hyde Park element, at the time, black history, black culture really wasn't represented. And for me, that was important. It was important. It gave me strength. It gave me the extra kinetic energy to keep pushing forward, because it was important. I grew up looking at the creative output of Ebony and Jet. I mean, John H. Johnson is one of my idols in terms of what he was able to do and why he did it, how he did it, despite the odds. Black entrepreneurship in itself is a creative endeavor on every level, and I'm a big fan of those who are willing to take that risk, whether it's as an entrepreneur or as a creative person. It's inspiring to me, because the journey itself that's the big thing, to have the heart and courage to go through the journey, to attempt to do something.
Well, and the reason why is because it's not like there's not the automatic if you work hard you will make it, because the playing field is tilted.
Yes.
And you have endless people in this country, mostly white, who really think that that we're in some sort of post-racial era in America, and they go, well, of course it's post-racial. We just elected a colored guy president, and
right.
And so what does that do for the 80 people who are shot every day or every week in this city, most of them being black? How do you call that post-racial when you have such income inequity at every turn, and there's a blanket denial of opportunity for a whole class of people. So it is tough.
Yes.
And what did you do to kind of raise your visibility to especially in terms of being a performing artist, maybe doing your poetry and things like that? What kind of traction did you get having to go to just the few venues that you went to?
In terms of motivation, it kept me motivated because North Lawndale had its problems with crime. North Lawndale historically, we've always looked at North Lawndale as an island, being split off from the rest of the city because of how the expressway is, and certain things that go on in the city or go on in North Lawndale, and I'm speaking from the past, whereas the rest of the city wouldn't have a clue. I mean, social media has changed everything in terms of awareness. But back then, I mean, it was nothing to come out and hear about your friend being shot or killed or someone being mugged, et cetera, et cetera. It would never hit the news media in Chicago.
Right.
So
for people, hey, let me just interrupt real quick. For people who are listening, North Lawndale is also the location of the Chicago Police Department's torture facility, which many people have read about.
Right.
That's, as a matter of fact, it's right around the corner from that school.
Oh,
so this is North Lawndale. North Lawndale is both a little bit of money's trickling in now, and I think, wasn't it just before the turn of the century when they got a lot of gentrification money in there because they wanted to have the west side of Chicago where a lot of affluent money went. The only place they could push further was west and south.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
and that went right through Lawndale.
Right, exactly. I mean, we're right off the Route 66 in Ogden, which takes you as far out of the city as you can go. As a small child, I think I was maybe early teenager, mid-teenager. I was talking to a neighbor of mine on Millard Street, and she and I we would just do the knowledge in terms of the location of North Lawndale. It's a perfect location. There's L track, Route 66.
Yeah, it's got great transportation. Yeah.
Right. We knew it was only a matter of time before they tried to come over to North Lawndale and change the entire population and culture that we knew, that we grew up knowing. We knew this is early 80s, mid 80s. We knew this. It was only a matter of time, And then it's being involved with different community groups, going to different community events, just to stay aware. I think something else that my aunt, they really invested in me in terms of it was education, the importance of staying on top of current news, understanding your environment politically. So going to different community events, some of the talk went over my head, but just being there long enough, I started to understand certain things. Certain plans were already in place. Things that are going on now in North Lawndale seemingly have been in place for many years. And it is sad. And before I moved from North Lawndale, my wife and I had a youth program teaching communication leadership. And the purpose of this teaching communication leadership is to impart the understanding to the young people that you have a voice, and you have a right to use that voice, and how to use that voice and speak with clear, distinct thoughts, followed by, of course, the heart and passion that you have. Learning to tell your own story, learning to control the narrative of your life. You tell your truth, so no one else can come back and retell your truth, and it turned out to be it's fiction, it's false. And this during that whole time, this is of course in my adulthood, seeing the gentrification, seeing the hardworking elders being pushed out of their homes. It's just, And the thing is, we saw this. I mean, as talking amongst my friends, we kind of saw or knew this was going to happen, and almost not prophesizing, but seeing the future and then seeing it come to fruition was like, it's heartbreaking, very heartbreaking. But during the course of my entire journey, just in terms of being creative, teaching, like the youth that we did in terms of leadership and communication, I knew early on that just staying positive and keeping my potential intact and really building on it, it keeps me healthy, it keeps me spiritually connected, and in doing so, I can help other people. And so that's important.
Well,
to me.
Yeah, and it sounds like you also, you've got your sense of history, you've got your sense of where we've come from, and a lot of people don't realize how family is important in terms of creating and maintaining an oral history.
True.
About the culture, about our culture, and so it's kind of cool that you had those kind of people around you, because there is kind of a centering, that works really well. That you're grounded in your community. You're grounded. You have an investment in the people around you, and then the other part that people don't pay attention to is the fact that when you have that kind of upbringing, that kind of support structure, that kind of community, you are more aware of what's going on around you, because the people just listening to, I remember listening to my parents and them talking to their friends about what was going on in the city and things like that. And it made me far more politically aware at a young age than I would ever have been otherwise.
Yeah. I agree.
And then in Chicago, politics is a full contact sport. Am I lying?
Oh no, you're right on point. It's incredible.
And right now we got a mayor under siege because he's either incompetent or a liar or both, claiming that before this election that I had the hardest fought election I've ever been in. I did not see this boy get shot 16 times. And first of all, it's a lie. Yeah. He had to have seen, because Rahm Emanuel's a control freak, and the police have been really bad in Chicago for a long time.
That's right. Yeah. Oh yeah.
I got my best beating from a cop during a peace demonstration over at the University of Chicago. I had no idea they could hit you that hard with a stick, and the bruise didn't show, but your bones hurt.
Wow.
Yeah, I got a good lesson in anatomy then.
Right.
But it's an interesting city because there's so much going on. They talk about, New York is this and New York is that, but you know what? It doesn't have the same flavor that we have here. Right. And there's nothing of L.A. in Chicago at all. And so even our artistic people have a different perspective. They have a different bent. Could a Dick Gregory have come from Mobile, Alabama? Well, it's kind of doubtful. But he could certainly come from, the south side of Chicago. What about Muhammad Ali? Muhammad Ali grew up and spent most of his time here. And look at what he did, away from boxing. The politics of being a conscientious objector. So there's a rich history in this town that a lot of people don't know about. The Chicago Defender was probably the biggest influence in the black migration north at the turn of the last century. In the early 1900s, there were articles in there about how to behave when you came up north and you were in the city, how to dress, how to find an apartment, all kinds of things. And they used to take that newspaper and sneak it on the trains because all the porters were black. And then at certain railroad crossings through the South, they'd throw bundles of newspapers out for, Southern blacks. And so, when you look at that rich history and to have the kind of the oral history that your family was bringing you, day after day, night after night, it's kind of cool looking at how that influenced you as an artist,
Yeah, as a person, I'm lucky. I thank God in terms of in the universe for that, because I mean, there's a lot of friends of mine, didn't make it to high school, physically, they just couldn't make it to high school, gang. I mean, it's friends of mine I used to hang out with, no longer here, and this is that foundation that really allowed me to stay alive, stay focused,
right,
and to really nurture interests that I have. I am definitely lucky in that regard.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Well, okay, let's scoot ahead a little bit and let's talk about when you started writing with a purpose and not with a purpose of the basic, your desire to express yourself, but what about writing for other people? When did you hit that threshold when you said, what I want to write it for publication? When did you think? When did that kind of hit you to get serious? And I don't mean that you weren't serious before. You know what I mean, don't you?
Oh yeah, definitely. I think the first time I ever was actually published was a school newspaper, both schools, grammar school and high school. But I think after high school, I was trying to decide what type of college I was going to try to go to. I think I settled for a 2-year college that I switched afterwards. But with the photography, it allowed me access to different events. And
right.
I was able to actually start to write a few articles. I did a few articles for the Windy City Word, which is on the west side of Chicago, which is great. I had like my own little column. It was great. It's called Noise at the time, and short for Illinois. It was an entertaining column, typical, but it allowed me, the freedom to kind of really write things that I was interested in. And it wasn't fiction, but it was real life. People, I got to interview individuals, and I think that really kind of propelled me too. I went to the Chicago Defender a few times, just trying to get in, so to speak, because I really wanted to write for a black publication. I really wanted to be involved with a black publication. Of course, they didn't let me in. They didn't let me in. They said, "Oh, you gotta come back after a few." But I did get the opportunity a few times to get a tour of the Chicago Defender. Great history lesson. This is when it was still at that building. In the archives of history, it was incredible, mind-blowing. I wish I could have taken pictures of actually just the environment. And then of course the jobs. I've written for almost every job I've had, from media releases or business correspondence. And for a while, I put aside fiction writing. I mean, in terms of seriously. I knew I definitely wanted to be published. I wanted to be one of those individuals to write, and send off and give my rejection letters, and I did get a few. So after I reached that plateau, I said, okay, well, that's enough of that. But then I was always writing, and I think I came across this idea, thinking about my life, and I said, it's kind of cool to create a fictional character, a fictional universe, and kind of talk about indirectly some of the things that I've seen in terms of the importance of culture, the trials and tribulations of an individual, quote unquote, coming from the west side of Chicago, navigating a world that most people are unaware of, just urban life.
Sure.
So, and then loving science fiction, loving fantasy. I think my first fantasy book that I was just enthralled with, I've read many growing up, but this is one particular thin book. It was called The Legend of Tariq by Walter Dean Myers. And I didn't know that he was black at the time. This is like a grade school book. Back in grade school, you had these big book mobiles come to the school. You go up there and pick out some books and take them home. And his book was it was inspiring. It was very thin. It was full of life, full of energy. I said, I want to do that. And so I remember that I used to read that book every year, once a year, as a ritual. Just kind of keep in tune with what I eventually want to do.
Sure.
Then after doing some activism and work with some youth, I said, I want to create a character that's in a world that kind of expresses what I've done for them, what I've learned in terms of trying to connect other people with resources and see how it goes. So it's a fantasy book. It's called Legacy Chronicles, and I started off with dark fantasy poetry, kind of a la Edgar Allan Poe.
Okay.
The second book will actually be the actual novel. So that's what I'm working on now. It's actually being edited, so we'll see how that goes, and hopefully I'll be able to put that out soon.
So not, I don't want to say social justice, but at least social awareness seems to permeate the motivation for you to write. To pull together the elements that you obviously either grew up with or were compelling for you, and embedding them in your stories, right?
Yes, definitely. They say write. When I was learning to be a writer, reading articles, I met a few people. I think this gentleman's name from New York. He was just telling me, write what you know. Another person does write every day. So writing what you know, I said, okay, what do I know? I haven't, jumped off buildings and did that type of adventure thing, but understanding that, the black story in most neighborhoods is not one that's really being pushed outside of hood life. There are a lot of other great stories there, So
yeah,
I really would like to bring that type of narrative, or help that type of narrative be more prominent. And this is on the fantasy and fiction level. So with that level, it's not a lot of cursing and things of that nature, but it's palatable. Whereas I think someone can enjoy it and maybe get something out of it. If nothing else, be inspired. I want to be the person, whereas 20 years from now, a person going to a bookstore, and in the future, an e-book store, and flip through some e-books, and this happenstance, pick up my book. Because that's what happened to me. I would be in bookstores and pick up books of authors I didn't know, and be enthralled with the story. But also, in some elements, pull something from it, whether it's being a good person, et cetera, but finding some way to be connected to the story.
And kind of what age group are you writing for? Is this like adult contemporary, or can young adults? Is it fairly accessible for young adults?
I think young adults can read it. I'm not shooting specifically for a particular YA group.
Right.
I'm just kind of writing. It's kind of funny. A friend of mine and I were discussing the whole genre, the whole YA thing, and he hates it. And I said, well, it's great because as a parent, I would like to know what level of language or detail my child is going to read. So from a marketing standpoint, I understand it, but I think it's just important to kind of write the story first and not worry about the labels and stuff. Just write the story. After the story is written, then you can kind of decide. Then you'll know the book with itself will kind of tell you who the story is for. I remember reading the book now, and back in the day I would read the books and they were over my head like, wow, what happened? I'm on the bus. I kind of cover the book a little bit just in case someone read what I just read. Like, what is this? But that, I was at the age that I could handle it. In terms of whatever was going on in the narrative. But I think anyone can read the book, and anyone who likes science fiction will be able to appreciate it. It's not like I'm not going to write about a vulgar or over-the-top violence. I kind of want that to kind of be in the narrative, whereas your imagination can fill in the blank, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Well, and let's be honest, a lot of people don't live a life like that, so it's not that relatable. Obviously, there's a place for space opera. There's a place for, Chainsaw Massacre. There's a place for all those different genres, but they don't all appeal to the same people.
Right.
There are times when I think I may have erred by putting, like a sex scene in a couple of my books.
You know, and not because it's bad sex, because it's not so much like that, but what if it automatically disqualifies me from being a great, you know, young adult book, or, you know, something that they read in high school? You know what I mean?
Sure. Definitely.
So I worry about that a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, and that's what I was talking to my buddy about in terms of just really the marketing aspect. You know, in terms of who, like I say, the book's not for everyone. So I think, you know, once the story is written, then you have to find the audience that way. You know, I'm not unless like, for example, I'm doing a few submissions and there are specific guidelines, and then I can specifically write, which I've actually started to do more. Look at submissions and write specific stories for specific guidelines. I find that's it creates a different imagination of flow for me.
Sure.
Where to do things for those submissions versus my own story. So I would say it's hard. It's hard to say. I think whatever comes out in the story is probably what the story should be about.
Yeah,
whatever happens,
that's true.
Should happen, but to kind of, if you want to write for youth for the YA, then go in that direction. You know. I feel almost like you're hindering some creative spirit by stopping to take this out because so and so is not going to like it. It's almost like poetry. You know, poetry is it's everyone doesn't like poetry. You know, so but so I can't write poetry for the next person. I have to express whatever comes out. That's what it is. If not, it's, you know, two other people will. You know, so.
Well, and there's a lot to be said about artistic honesty, too. When people sense that you have artistic honesty, regardless of what the detail is or the genre or the language or the age group, you know, as long as it's authentic, you know, people recognize it as art.
Right. Exactly.
So that's pretty cool. Now, let me ask you this, because I'm curious. What about let's look at the sexual dynamics of what you write. We already know about the racial dynamics, but you know, are you finding that your books have an appeal across both sexes, or all the 38 genders that I think we've discovered up until now?
Well, let's see. Well, what I have presently is like a book of dark fantasy poetry. So again, it's more like horror poetry. And I've had more interest sales off of Kindle, off of Amazon than anything else. I've had some direct emails. And most of them are women. Most of them are women in terms of that regard.
Dude, I don't understand it either. I wrote hard sci-fi, and I'm finding more women are reading it than men.
Which that speaks to a whole nother. That's a whole nother topic. Which is why. That's a whole other topic. Oh my goodness! In terms of, I think the why is because
black women tend to read more than black men, and then studies have shown black men tend to read more nonfiction. You know, business-based books, autobiographies, biographies, things like that. So,
and I think I'm not sure in terms of the. Why the black women, but in terms of black men, I can understand why. Because I grew up, again, just going back to kind of using my own situation as a barometer.
Right.
I had Ebony and Jet. I was a bookworm. You know, I was able to find characters that I can kind of relate, even though they weren't my color. But nowadays, with the information going so fast, in terms of, you know, they're taking some books and shortening the reading selection, reading time for certain schools. I mean, little boys, they learn differently, you know, and so visually helps, you know, which is why a lot of authors that I'm speaking to now, and I'm doing the same thing for the novel itself, make sure there's an image of a black male there.
Okay.
So they can identify. You know, because the same thing happens in terms of when we were doing the youth program. You know, the young ladies would be more, it was more apt to jump in terms of participate. It would take a little bit more time to kind of get the guys motivated enough. That's because I had to create, kind of talk to them and create a linkage between what I wanted them to do and the fact that they were able to do it by showing them different images of different black authors.
Sure.
So that type of thing is not promoted. They can see themselves in doing that. So I can. That's starting at a young age. Now, if that isn't increased at a young age, when they get older, yeah, I mean, getting them to read fiction and things like that, if they weren't already doing it through comic books or through novels at some point in time, it's going to get them it's hard. And then that translates into education, the academics. Being able to sit down and read, and to be attentive and to pay attention. That's definitely interesting. That's definitely interesting. So it's one of those things we have to work on as a people in terms of how to motivate the young boys to read. I think it's important to kind of get them to write more about themselves.
Okay.
They can see the connection. They can feel a connection to the printed word on paper when they themselves are the creators of the printed word.
Do you do much outreach to younger kids? Kind of mentoring yet, or have you not reached that stage? Or maybe how do you feel about that?
Oh, I think it's definitely important. I haven't. My wife and I, we used to live in North London. We moved north, but before we left North London, we had a youth leadership program.
Okay.
Whereas we would go to different schools, and we would teach leadership. My wife was a public speaker, voiceover artist, and I backed up in terms of marketing, photography, and teaching. And we would teach leadership and communication skills in terms of the first thing is breaking the ice. First thing is getting comfortable speaking in front of a crowd, speaking in front of your peers. Then after that, after we get to that level, we will say, okay, now we want you to write speeches. Any topic. As long as it's not vulgar, any topic. And allowing the youth, first off, giving them the green light to express themselves is fundamental in their growth. Proving to them that we want to hear from you. We want to hear your thoughts. That's not something they normally hear. They're normally dictated to. They're to be seen or heard, that type of thing. We say, no, you have a voice. You have a voice. You have a right to express yourself within a certain context or frame or whatever situation. We want to hear from you. And the topics would range from violence in their family, violence on the streets, what they want to do with their life. They love shopping. The topics vary. And we'll teach them how to write, how to structure it, get over their fear of performing in front of an audience. And then at the end of each session, we had a community graduation where we invited the community out. We would invite politicians. Congressman Danny Davis was a big supporter of our program. Aldermen.
Yeah, ours too. Yeah.
Fire department chief, the police department, we would have one of the community officers come out of uniform.
Right.
They would come out. And it would be a beautiful demonstration. We had several graduations. And I think one of the biggest things for us was a young man at the beginning of our program. It's like an 11-week program. He was kicked out. He was kicked out of school. I forget what school it was. He was talkative. He was a young thug type of individual. Kicked out of school, but he stayed with our program. Performed at the graduation. Unbeknownst to all of us, the principal was in the audience. The principal, at the end of his speech, he saw him, he put him to the side, said, listen, I need to see you in my office on Monday. Because the thing is, she had never had the opportunity to hear him as an individual, to hear his thoughts, to appreciate what he had to offer. And she was blown away. Yes, he spoke with slang, but it was the passion of which he used to express himself. It was his truth. It was his narrative, how he saw and viewed the world.
Right.
He got back in school that same session.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's incredible. So the power of that's something I would definitely want to get back into. Now we've kind of moved up north and get things settled. on the family side, it's definitely something I need to get back into because it's needed. And if not me, then who is it going to be?
Right.
I think every person that's the activist.
Well, let's talk about this later. I mean,
sure.
Maybe there's some things that you and I can do together.
Sure. Definitely.
Hang on a second. You're listening to the Genesis Science Fiction Radio Show, service of the blacksci-fi.com website. This is your, I almost said September, your December 11th, 2015 episode, and we're talking to Ced Pharaoh, a fellow Chicagoan, writer, photographer, poet. We could call you a performer, right?
Yeah, well, I've never really done that much performing, but yeah, photographer and writer, that's great, and author. Yeah,
okay, all right, cool. So you talk about wanting to put together some stories, given, and bringing what you really wanted to bring to the table in terms of how they would move people and your expression of culture and things like that. Can you give us kind of like a little overview, and let's start with the Legacy Chronicles, because it says book 1, and you made the same mistake I did, which is you put book 1 on the first thing, and then now people expect other
right.
books. When I put book, volume 1 of the Dark Side trilogy, people said, well, come on, where's the next book?
Exactly.
So, but give us just an overview of the plot and
mm-hmm.
how you kind of conceived of it and ran it together, and what were the important elements that you built into your story? The things that were essential for you to have other people see. You know what I mean?
Sure. Well, again, like you said, I made a mistake with book 1, titling it that way, but it worked out. I wanted from an artistic standpoint, I wanted every book to be kind of different. I wanted the first book to be dark fantasy poetry that kind of give you an overview of the monsters, supernatural elements, et cetera, that you will eventually encounter in book 2, which would be the novel.
Okay.
And book 3 was going to be a more of a graphic visual novel, maybe comic book standard. So the basic overview is that there's a young activist-minded individual who discovers his culture after a trip to Africa. And that's when he finds out that his heritage, some of his ancestors were these blessed warriors that helped fight supernatural elements. Unbeknownst to him, parts of his family are indeed these blessed warriors. They kept it from him because he didn't seem to have any particular special abilities. After he comes from Africa, after he gets like a little knowledge, something in him sparks, and his natural skills and elements of being able to harness certain energies come into play. And then at that point, that's when he comes back to Chicago. He realizes just how, as they say, beat the rabbit hole goes in terms of what he thought what was evil was even deeper than that, and then how he navigates that element. And taking it from an activist standpoint, it was always, I'm the type of person I always try to bring different elements, different people together, because I've got this idea that multiple parts makes a greater whole. And there was something in terms of North Blondale and in a few other locations in Chicago, how I would see the activists, the different groups of activists or different groups of community people, really have the same goal in mind, but different ideologies come into play, and they're more at odds. They're more at odds than anything else. And I come to realize, like, wow, if they would just get together, they would be powerful as a unified group. So that's the type of thing that he, and his name is Glyphics, that's how the type of thing that he encounters when he comes back to Chicago. He says, okay, now I've got these kind of abilities. Let me try to see how I can use them to better the community. And he before he can really get involved in supernatural elements, he's kind of learning the ropes in terms of how other groups are working together and how they don't work together. And while that's a fun, and how that comes into play and becomes a problem for the entire city.
Well, and that's kind of like it's both an allegory and a microcosm of life as it is.
Yes.
That's one of the universal the universal challenges that anybody has when they want to foment change. They want to make things better, or even worse. If you want to take over a crime syndicate or whatever,
exactly.
all of the challenges are the same. You have to figure out what's the ebb and flow of the energy and the flow of money, the flow of energy, the flow of culture, and then B, how do you grab hold of it and manipulate it for your own good ends or even nefarious ends. So that's kind of that's a great setup.
Mm-hmm.
And when you were writing it, tell us a little bit about your process. Did you do the whole outline first? Did you know your ending already? Do you create the characters first, or do you do the universe first? How did all that come about?
Well, for this particular story, for this particular series, I came up with the premise first. Trying to kind of write what you know, to kind of write what you've experienced. So that whole thing about activism, the whole thing about the complications, and I figured outside of the supernatural, what would be very interesting is the dynamic of trying to get humans to work together.
Right.
The conflictingness in that, in terms of the different personalities, and then when you mix in the different personalities of different ideologies, and then different age groups, the generation. That's a whole nother level of problem. So I kind of wanted to play with that. Have the younger generation argue with the older generation in terms of, you should be passing the baton or whatnot. So I came with the story, the basic premise of that first, and then I created the character, the idea of the character. But when I started to lay out the story, I'm from growing up writing outlines for like the biggest thing, outlines for a speech, whether it's a presentation, a business presentation I've done, so I'm doing an outline so I can see the ending, and then I kind of re-engineer from that point to this is the ending. This is what I want to see happen with them. Okay, now I need to figure out how to get there. That's the basic premise. Sometimes it doesn't always go like that on a day-to-day basis. I'm waking up in the middle of the night thinking of a great scene. It happens on the train, on the bus, in the middle of a meeting. So, and then I kind of take those elements, those notes, and then plug them back into the outline and see, okay, does it work in this place? Is this where it's supposed to be? One big, it's organizing, keeping it organized, because a lot of thoughts can come into your mind, and it's kind of, and all thoughts really don't belong in the same project. So just trying to keep it organized. And so I've got this great software that I kind of helps me stay organized. But thankfully, I've got the software, because otherwise, it's, the Word document by itself would be oh my goodness, crazy.
Well, I mean, there are so many tools for writers, and so many people write in such different styles. And I don't mean styles like their written work. I mean their organizational capacity are all different, and I have yet to meet two writers who do things the same. That's just the nature of. I think that's the nature of what we do.
Right.
So that's kind of cool. And then is writing a singular pursuit for you, or do you have a support group? Maybe your spouse. Do you throw things against her to see how they stick or what she thinks of them? I mean, how is your process? Mine is pretty singular. I used to use other people. Now I just plow straight ahead.
Yeah, mine's pretty singular. It's pretty singular because also the times in which I have to write to kind of look at the notes tends to happen right about now up until like 2:00 in the morning. So when it's quiet,
me too.
Sleep, I'm not being asked for questions and answers and things of that nature. So initially it's singular. Then of course I handed off to write like the poetry book. I handed off to an editor, and she took a look at it. And because I've gone to school and I've done reports, and I'm all for comments and critiques. I'm not afraid of that type of red hashtags, hash marks, and I look for that. I want that so I can kind of see where I can, improve upon in certain areas of writing. So it's singular, definitely singular. But then after I hand it off, I'm open to comments and criticisms immensely. Just make sure I'm not writing gibberish.
Well, I mean, some people do that very well, and then some people don't have the strength. I don't want to say strength of character. I take that back. It has nothing to do with strength of character, but maybe the confidence in their writing, so that they can sustain criticism. Because criticism is hard. When it's coming from your heart, when you've written something, there is an emotional buy-in. There's a word that I can't think of because I can't remember the word, but well, no, we all have a vested interest in our work. I'm sorry, I did remember the word. Everybody seeks validation for their work, and it's tough. It's tough out there. When you went and started on your first book, which was not poetry. How hard was it? When you're putting that all together, what was the process easy for you? I mean, how did you sit down and write your first book? Because I know when I sat down and wrote mine, I didn't know a damn thing about writing. I didn't know anything about writing. And no, I'm serious. And I was psychotic about researching because I didn't want some Tom Clancy weenie going, oh man, you can't, your submarine can't fly. What's wrong with you, boy? And then I wanted my characters to sound like real. I mean, the psychosis that I went through, I hope nobody ever has to go through that. But having said that, how was it for you?
You know what? I think it was. I was comfortable, relatively comfortable, in terms of being a
crafting the story.
Crafting the story, being a photographer, like watching people watching.
Okay.
People watching in terms of photography, teaching me how to be patient, observing. I mean, even before I went off to Northwestern for a brief time, just observing the surroundings and writing about those things, even whether it's through poetry or just the description. I think one of the key things I read, I think Octavia Butler said this, in terms of, I could be wrong, just in terms of writing, just write what you see. So I would just write what I see in terms of, like, if I'm at a cafe, just write what I see, just be descriptive. And having that as almost like clip art, just having it somewhere in the notebook to use, to kind of use as filler. Because sometimes, the confidence kind of takes a dive where you can't think of anything. Wow. It's like, oh my goodness, okay, I'm supposed to be in a cafe. But luckily I've written something small, 2 or 3 lines, to kind of help kickstart me into that next thing. So, what was I going with that? I felt very comfortable trying to craft this story. Again, I was big on, I had teachers that was like, they would drill outlines into you. I'm talking about drill outlines and then drill deeper into the outline. So the outline was a multi-tier, because basically I was taught, whereas if you build the outline, which is a skeleton, you keep adding on, eventually what you will see actually would be the finished product. You just need to add, some identifiers and connect some other thoughts and ideas. So I kind of used that element initially. And that was a long process because I had WordPerfect at the time. So I had pages and pages of ideas and switching them around. And with the software that I have now, it's easy to switch around scenes. It's easier now to kind of keep that flow going.
What do you use?
Was it Scrivener?
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, for the Mac. And before that, I used the software, this guy from Australia. Oh my goodness, it's called White Rider. He himself is a writer, but he's also a software guy. So he created something called White Rider, which was like my first real software. It was free downloads, and I used that for years, crafting different things. It was great, but then I switched over to Mac. Unfortunately, he didn't have the time to accommodate his software to a Mac, so I had to let him go. But yeah, White Rider was a great one.
I still use WordPerfect.
Oh, really? Wow. Yeah, I
Don't make me sound old and out of step like that, man. Oh, man, just right to my face on the show. No, I'm just kidding, man.
I used to use WordPerfect too. I used to use WordPerfect too, but then I just I think someone gave me a copy of Word for Christmas present or something. Luckily, I got hooked onto that. So, and plus it worked with the jobs I've had. I've done some marketing and things like that, so that kind of helps. And I kind of help writing for different. And I tell this to other writers. I said, learn to write other things. Learn to write media releases. Learn to really read newspaper articles, and try to write your own article, because that'll help you in your writing. Because when it comes down to making it more realistic, being able to change it up a little bit in terms of the writing style or the content, kind of helps your story.
Right.
I know in this story, in the Legacy Chronicles, I'm definitely using the media as a co-narrator in terms of explaining some different things and kind of showcasing or explaining, I should say, different events that kind of help push the story along. So, so that helps also.
And have you gotten much feedback on the novel?
Yeah, so far. I mean, the editor. I had one. I have to get another editor. The last one, she got bogged down with some other projects, but so far so good. So far so good. I've let a few key writers take a look at it, and they've given some feedback. And I'm just excited to make it happen because it's been a long time coming, at least a year. I mean, almost a year behind, so I need to step it up. But in the meantime, I've been submitting to different publications. I have a story now out with a book called The City, cyberpunk anthology that just came out this year. So
right.
I'm doing different like short stories and things like that. So I have a few things on the back burner, then also that are coming out this year, and then also next year, hopefully. Fingers crossed.
Nice. And so far your writing has been singular. You've been doing it with yourself. Mm-hmm. Have you given any thought to doing a collaborative piece of work with somebody else, or are you just not at that point yet?
Yeah, actually, unfortunately, I had to turn down an opportunity like that earlier this year. The time just didn't work out. It was an author. Her name was Candy. I think her last name was Candy Deli, and it was for a collaborative piece, a YA adventure story that she had. I just didn't have the time to do it. I loved it, and she's brought it out. I think it's coming out, and it's called. I can't think of the name of it. I can't think of the name of it, but it's a great piece. It looks good. So yeah, I'm definitely looking to do more of that. I definitely want to do a collaborative piece at some point in time with the right persons. Recently, like I said, I just submitted to NV Media Publishing for their anthology, The City, which happened to come about with a Facebook group. Someone threw out a prompt. I think it was Milton Davis threw out a prompt, an idea, and people was kind of start tagging, almost freestyling, just tagging like scenes and ideas, and all of a sudden it developed into a project. So it's called The City, a cyberpunk anthology, came out this year, and I've got a story in that, so I'm pretty excited about that as well.
And are you is it easy for you to switch between writing short stories and then doing book length stuff? What is your where's your comfort zone, or is there no difference at all?
It's a big difference. It's almost a release. When I was going through a hard time with my novel, which is of course a longer form. Right. A few anthologies came into play, and I was able to switch gears, like The City, the anthology that I did for Milton's group. I was able to switch. I had like a little writer's block, a little anxiety about the story's not going where I want to go, And the anthology opportunity came across. And because the story, and through submissions, like the story is already set up, the length of the story is set up, the world is kind of built in, I was able to dive right into it in terms of a short story aspect.
Sure.
I didn't really think about too much of the world building, so to speak. The rules of what goes on in this world, why it goes on, and how, explaining that at least to myself so I can write about it. Those things kind of fall away with the submission, to a short story submission. So yeah, I definitely want to do more of those actually. I've got 2 more to do before this year's out. Hopefully I'll make it. It's almost like a relief. It keeps the creative juices going. I don't want to stop writing. They become cold. You need to keep the knife sharp as possible. And, then I came back to I was able to see things like a little more clearer. Kind of stepping away from the main project sometimes is a good thing. Give you a different perspective.
And so, are you kind of? For me, we spoke about this. I do IT work to pay my bills, but how close? Do you see yourself sooner rather than later, maybe being able to switch to writing mostly instead of not writing mostly? Like for me, I'm still at the 80-20 rule, where 80% of my time is, the time that I spend is in trying to promote what I'm doing and getting people to take a look at it. And then, but, only 20% of my time is devoted to writing.
Right. I'm really trying to get to the point that I can write more.
Okay.
First, I'm with the mindset that with social media, again, me and my friend was talking about social media. It's the whole aspect of promoting what you have, even if you don't have it yet. Well,
sure.
My whole thing is I like to have it first, because I've done marketing before, and it's, I like the aspect of having a product 90% done, then promote it. So I like to do more writing, so I have more to almost push out. So that's the aspect that I'm at now. I will push out the novel 2016, and then I have 2 other short stories I intend to put out through Kindle. I just want to have more product to show to the world at one time. So when I have a table, I have something to present. I want it to be seen as I want to be seen almost.
Dude, I get you. I get you.
So that's where I'm at. It's a few things that need to be tightened up. Paying for editing is a necessary big expense, but I want it right, and that's another thing. I'm trying to find the right editor. The process of self-publishing is a process. It's from creation.
Well, you're an entrepreneur. You're an actual business.
Right. So it's a process of finding the right people at the right time, at the right money, is a creative endeavor in itself. But I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying it though.
And have you been to very many conventions or things of that nature, gatherings? In the service of your work?
I've been gathering intel, seeing how vendors operate, from seeing the best practices, seeing how setups are done. I've done trade show things before in terms of marketing and taking pictures and photography and things of that nature. So using that aspect of that keen eye, kind of see, okay, wow, this person's doing this, this person's doing that. I have a great idea in terms of what I would like to do. But also just going there, just doing the networking, networking with the artists, networking with the different vendors, whether they're publishers or they have some type of other technological business, is all important. Networking is the big key to success. So it's education. It's a free education actually. If you network properly, you can get a lot out of a convention or an event. So I've definitely. And definitely using that to my advantage too. I'm ready to get out there. I'm ready to be a vendor. I want to be on the other side of the table.
And when you, I mean, you know, the full Monty for marketing is so many things. You know, it's the artwork for your cover. It's putting together your press releases. It's saying the right things in a description that makes your work, makes people curious about your work. They want to pick it up. They want to read it and things like that. You know, when, you know, you mentioned that you're very good at marketing. How did you acquire that skill set, and what, you know, what kind of process did you have to go through to acquire, you know, the kind of I don't want to say perfection, but at least the kind of the skills that you have to employ, and how did you hone those?
Well, let's see. In terms of when I think I was in grammar school, high school. So what do you want to be? You know, it's always what do you want to be in school? What do you want to be? I said at the time it was business administration. I want to go into business.
Okay.
Sure. Now that's a large, wide topic, but that was the skill that I gave, business administration. So, but I've enjoyed the marketing aspect, because it's still creative, trying to brand a product, trying to brand a service. So maybe not my first few jobs. No, I take that back. I think my first real job was a sales position, which is key in terms of business, you know, sales.
Oh,
and
sure.
Sales,
yeah.
And this job was, I was working at a mall. I was one of those people who said, "Excuse me, sir, excuse me, miss, would you like to do a survey?" I was one of those people. So I think my first day on the job, I think I got rejected roughly about 75 times. Rejected in all types of ways. The nicest way to the most vile way imaginable in one day. So
did anybody spit on you?
Huh? What did you say?
Did anybody spit on you?
No, but they looked like they wanted to do that and a lot more. Maybe punch me in the face for asking to take time out of their day to do a survey. I think I was in high school. Oh yeah. Well, I was out of high school. My first real job.
Right.
But I stayed with it for like 6 months, which is longer than anyone else on that job. Normally they lasted 2 months. But what I got from that, is that not to take it personal. What I developed from that was having a thick skin in terms of being told no, you know.
Right.
And then I've had other sales positions, cold calling. It's the same thing, not to take it personal. And the more effort you put out, at some point in time it'll come back to you. You will benefit from that. You know. So developing the thick skin, developing the courage to not accept fear. Fear doesn't come into play in terms of trying to sell something. I've done that. You know, gotten rejected 75 times in one day. I'm over that. So that allowed me to get other positions in terms of on the phone positions, marketing positions, sales positions in terms of IT. Same type of thing, cold calling. So that kind of helps my confidence in terms of presenting the product verbally or non-verbally. So hopefully when it comes to my personal projects and products, that I can benefit greatly from that experience. You know, so having experience outside creatively, will help in that endeavor.
I think it's already helping you, because remember when you said that you're not afraid of criticism?
Right.
You know, that's got to figure into there, because first of all, you're not. I would imagine you don't take your criticism personally.
Right. No.
but you look at it as a critique of the work that you've done, and a lot of people can't disconnect. You know, their person, their ego, their all of that.
Right.
Excuse me. You know, to be able to accept criticism.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I definitely agree.
So that, yeah. All right. So what's next on your agenda?
Okay. Finishing up this novel. Looking for a new editor. Kind of help finish this up. I'm excited about the new project with the City, which is a cyberpunk anthology with NV Media. Excited about that. 18 writers, I've never been a part of a group anthology like this, so I'm excited about the opportunity of promoting the product with other writers.
Right.
The actual character for my book, I've licensed out for a small comic book project that's coming out in 2016.
Nice.
So I'm excited about that. Yeah, so I'm excited about that. Great opportunity in terms of promoting branding the character in time for the actual novel.
Right.
And then I got other submissions. I've found some old stories that I've had when I was a little kid, actually, that I was like, wow, that sounds pretty good. Back then, I thought it was amazing. Now I'm like, I need some work, but I haven't seen this idea done or heard about this idea. So I have a few things that I want to try in that realm too, and do some more submissions.
Right.
You brought up earlier about collaborations, and I think something I've been finding. Collaborations happen all the time. Dual collaborations. I forget this author's name. But he's out all. It's like every other week. It's him and his name is on the book with another writer you've never heard of. I said that's
right.
great. That's a great way to really push your name, push your ideas. And there's so many ideas, and it's just not enough time. And to have a partner or partners to kind of help push those things forward is a great idea. So I'm looking to do something like that too.
That's very cool. And if you were let's kind of change hats and let's go back to the mentor thing. Mm-hmm. Because you've worked with young kids, what kind of, building their confidence is one thing, because obviously you want to do that. Most kids are afraid of any kind of rejection or criticism because they don't have the same kind of judgment that you have in terms of, well, just because somebody said a little bit of this is not good or whatever, that doesn't invalidate me as a person. So when you're mentoring kids, because this is pretty important, because not only are you helping them with their expression and opening up a creative world for them where their voice can be heard, but you're also helping to create your future customers, because if
Absolutely.
they're interested in. So what kind of, give us kind of a little rundown on just the curriculum that you kind of put together when you do these programs for the kids, because what do you say, 8, 9, 10 weeks or whatever, that's not an inconsiderable amount of time. That's a lot of time to be working with kids.
Right. Yeah. So this is my wife and I. We did this about 3 years ago before we moved to.
Okay.
And it would be roughly 8 to 11 weeks. We really base it on the needs of the nonprofit. Sometimes we came in under a school. The school would have us do an after-school program, or another youth program would have us come out to their youth. So their youth would already have the youth, and we just had to come in under their banner and kind of help through the training. So initially, if I remember correctly, it's after introduction. The thing is about the youth and what we found when we try to teach other programs is that they need to understand and feel that you are genuine. They know when you're coming in as a paid person, that you're just a one shot. You're coming in because someone's paying you to do this. So the thing is, we break the ice and to prove to them, and this is what a lot of adults find difficult to do, to prove themselves to the youth, prove that they are definitely there in a genuine fashion to help them better themselves.
Right.
And we do that a number of ways. Icebreakers, play different games, and we just try to pull from them their own idea, their own story. Like, what do you want to do? If you had the opportunity right now, what would you rather be doing right now? Some people, I would rather be at home playing video games. So I would rather be doing this. Well, then why? Well, because, and you get them to talking about themselves. Because again, most of the time they're being dictated to. They're not being given the option of, hey, what do you think? And then giving them the floor, and letting them run with it. So we give them the floor. So this is a safe space. You can talk to us about whatever. You can say whatever's on your mind within reason, and giving them that boundary and that option, open them up to dialogue and things like that. And after you have that confidence in them, and they have that confidence in you, then you say, okay, this is what we're trying to do. We want you guys to perform on stage. They're like, whoa, we're afraid of, they have stage fright, so they've never done it before.
Oh, sure.
We start them off slowly, giving them 5-minute icebreakers. So we're going to apply a top cap a hat. You talk about it for like the next 30 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the topic, orange. Talk about orange for the next 30 seconds. And it will go around them like that. And then we do that enough times initially, they get used to speaking in front of their classmates. Then we say, okay, this is my wife would love this. She's not here now. She's in the front. Those crutch words. Every time they would say one of those things, we would give them pennies at the beginning of class. Every time they had to say one of those words, if they say one of the words, they had to give up a penny. Every time they say or they stutter, they have to give a penny. They hate to have to give up. These are just pennies. Now, these are high schoolers, right? It's a roll of pennies. They hate.
But it's competitive. Right?
Exactly. And it was fun. It was competitive. It was fun. And they would have to give up the pennies, so they would catch themselves and catch each other. And they improved in that way. So their confidence built, that they were able to control their thoughts. And then after that, it varied based on the group, the level of group, the level of education. Sometimes we had to spend more time on a group doing certain things in terms of breaking the ice or even pulling them outside of the classroom to kind of have a heart-to-heart talk to them about, hey, we're not getting paid to do this. You don't have to be here. You can go.
Mm-hmm,
and they're like, I said, but I want you to stay. So I want you to stay. I want you to stay because you're going to come across people, businesses that really don't care about you. We're trying to get you to care about yourself. Your future is in your hands, okay? And I would just go to this heart-to-heart thing in terms of just talking straight to them. Not as a teacher and not as, some mentor is talking down to them or a dictator. I was talking to them straight, eye to eye. And they felt the realness. And we had people that were going to leave and didn't leave. We used to run out of our home for a short period of time. So at 3:30, 4 o'clock, okay, you guys take it easy. Close the door. Go into the kitchen. Talking to my wife, playing with my little son. He was a baby at the time. I'm hearing all this laughing, this giggling. What's going on? I look into the living room. No one's there. What's all this noise? So outside the door, look outside, and 15 children plus their parents are hanging out on the front steps of my building. What are you guys doing here? What is going on? This is like 2 hours after the class has been dismissed, right?
Right.
It's because they found a safe space. They found a safe space. They felt comfortable. They were just hanging out, enjoying themselves. They needed a place, as they say, belong.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just that's why I have to get back to doing that on a regular basis as much as we can. Now that my son is older, he participates in quite a few programs too, so that'll make it easier. But it's definitely needed. I mean, being a source of inspiration for the next generation, that's a responsibility. That's
right.
Everyone should be doing it. And everyone should be doing that. That's how I feel about it. So it's definitely on the radar for me.
Very cool. Does your son have a desire to write or create, or does he look at your photography or anything like that? Where is it? I mean, is it? I'm sorry.
Absolutely. He when he was born, my wife and I she's a public speaker, and we used to have what was called a sponsored. We would sponsor a jazz talk show on WVON radio in Chicago. It's called the Mahogany Blues Show. At the time, we were the only, next to BEZ, we were the only station in Chicago that was playing jazz. He was born during that time. So he gets it honestly. In terms of writing, when he does presentations at school, he's fabulous. Everyone talks about how great he is, how his public speaking skills are. You know, he's writing a comic book, writing stories. I'm trying to get him to concentrate and focus on narrative and things like that. So he has a few projects that we're working on too as father and son. So he's one of my collaborators, or I'll be one of his collaborators, I should say.
He sounds pretty cool. I'd love to meet him. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. He's sitting next to me now. So he's definitely pulling from both my wife and myself. So I'm glad that inspires me also. That inspires me to keep me focused.
Well, sure.
You know, that's about the Legacy Chronicles. Ultimately, it's about passing it on, passing something of value, whether it's tangible or intangible. Passing something on that someone else can use is like one of the key things I'm trying to do.
That's great, man. If you let's take a few minutes and talk about. I mean, your process started very early. You know, you started writing, you know, before high school, and excuse me, if you were going to give young people, even older people, advice on the trip you took, you know, the journey that you set out on, what do you think are like maybe the top 2 or 3 things that you learned along the way that were really valuable to you and maybe even unexpected?
Wow.
Look, if I asked you easy stuff, man, you'd just be sitting there watching TV, having a beer, playing video games with your boy. You know, come on now.
Exactly. You know, I think because you know how I was raised was like this whole thing of dogmatic being organized.
Sure.
My aunt, great aunt, she came from the South. She'd tell you she's raised more white children than there are children in the family. You know, used to do laundry and dishes, and so she used to be a nurse. So raising me, I learned how to walk by pushing a vacuum cleaner.
Okay.
Okay. You know, being clean and being clean, but more being organized with time. You know, learning how to maximize one of the greatest resources, your own time. Besides your health, your time is one of the second greatest resources. So knowing how to organize that, because if you organize and take care of what you need to take care of, you have more time and space to do the things you want to do. That's how I was raised.
Sure.
So
yeah.
Being organized with your resources, whether you're doing homework, your job, that helps you find the time, space, and discipline so you can have the opportunity to do whatever you're trying to pursue. So definitely being organized. The second thing is, wow. What is the second thing?
Well, take your time. I mean, you know,
finding your passion, finding something that's. I know that topic has been worn over and over again. But finding your passion, something that you really want to do,
right?
It's important because, as I tell my son, I said, you are going to be faced with doing things you really don't want to do, jobs, whatever, homework. You keep your passion in the front of your mind next to the things that you have to do, so you can always see that there's something better. There's something more enjoyable. You don't want to do this homework, but you know you want to get back to coding. Do your homework.
Or to work toward.
Yeah, you know. So finding your passion, being organized, finding your passion, and then being fearless. You know, not being afraid of ridicule, comments, criticisms. Be fearless.
Mm-hmm.
Being unorganized will hold you back. Not understanding or finding a passion will make you sick. And then being afraid to go after that passion will also make you sick. It will also make you miserable. So being organized, finding your passion, and being fearless enough to do whatever you need to do to go after it, to learn about. Even if you never make it to the end, they say it's about the journey. Trying to get to a certain point will give you more happiness than not. So those
Very cool, man. I mean, And actually, those are very simple things to list. But there are people out there who have a tough time getting in touch with what their passion is.
Right.
And there are so many stoppers in the way where somebody says, well, I want to get into photography. Oh, but you gotta spend $3,000 on the camera you want, or you gotta get the computer with the software to do your picture. And so there's always things that tend to kind of hold people back. Cool. And then and that's where I think the fearless part plays in, because you have to decide, this is what I want, so I'm not going to accept no for an answer.
Cool.
And I think the only other thing that I would add to those things is the value of networking.
Oh, absolutely.
Because you don't know everything, and there's people out there who have done exactly what you want to do, and have made all the mistakes that you would make on your own.
Exactly.
That's
true. Yeah.
And that's important to me. I mean, I'm not so hard-headed that I won't listen to somebody else tell me about their experiences, so I know what to look out for, or to make sure that I don't fall in the same hole they might have fallen into. So I mean,
exactly.
That's good. And
absolutely.
And what since you're here in Chicago, do you belong to any writers groups or anything like that?
I've been looking. I've been invited to a few writers groups because of time. I would maybe get a notice late, and because I have a family, it's kind of hard to kind of break off. My wife and son aren't exactly trying to listen to me. Hey, I'm about to leave right now. They say, hey, no. So trying to find writer groups that do something on a monthly basis ahead of time. If I could get involved in something ahead of time, that would be great. I was thinking about starting one of my own, since I couldn't find one that was adequate enough. I know this guy named Joe Robinson, Joe Curry. He's a comic book writer, particularly underground comics. I know he's always game to get together and things like that. So definitely on the lookout. If you know of any in Chicago, definitely would love to get involved with some of those.
Yeah, I belong to a really good one. As a matter of fact, Ronald Jones was also in it, and it kind of disbanded. But I'm definitely wanting to look to put together, a good group, a group that's serious, not about at least about the craft, the art of the craft. It's not like they have to be all published, or they have to be, on the New York Times bestseller list. But what I'd like to do is have people around who I could talk to about the art, so that we could all learn from each other. So who knows? Maybe you and I can talk about that later too.
Absolutely. It's a great idea. I mean, building a community, it helps the movement. Movement, personal movement, as well as the larger movement of black arts and culture and just connectivity. So yeah.
I mean, we got a lot of things going on in this town. Excuse me. Natasha Womack, who wrote the Afrofuturism book, she's around. We have a great community, and I think going back to something that you said much earlier in the show is harnessing that energy, harnessing that creativity is something that I think a lot of people can get behind, and there's strength in that too. There's a lot of strength in that.
Yeah. I mean, this is on that. I think maybe I was trying to wait until I actually had physical books, but I was thinking about this earlier, maybe last week, of actually getting together, like I said, Miss Womack and a few others and yourself, maybe 2 or 3 authors, and then hit some schools and do like not so much, maybe a small workshop or presentation, educational component connected with an English class, whether it's grammar school or high school, just so they can see. And then going back into images and how important images are in terms of black images and in terms of that whole thing, so they can see people who write and create and their product with their name on it, so they can see that, hey, that's possible. That
right.
So they can kind of see themselves on that next level.
Yeah.
So because there's such a great community in Chicago in terms of artists that are doing it. I mean, Ashley, she's doing some stuff with Stranger Comics and Marvel. Names that children, young teenagers know about but have no direct correlation to.
Sure.
In terms of they have no idea that they could actually, someone from Chicago could actually get to that level. So, yeah.
Well, you know what? Anybody who's picking this up as the podcast or listening live now who lives in the area, this is definitely something we want to think about. You and I are both available to be contacted through the blacksciencefictionsociety.com website. So if there are people in the Chicago area who are interested in putting together a networking opportunity, something that happens maybe on a monthly basis, definitely get in touch with either of us, right?
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. Definitely. It's definitely needed switch.
All right, so enough about our old home stuff. Although I will say this, in the earlier years, that High Park community that you and I both, spent our educational time in was pretty unique, in terms of the kinds of intellectual endeavor that happened. Part of that is because of the University of Chicago, and part of that was because of the multi-ethnic nature of, the Hyde Park, Kenwood, South Shore communities,
Right, exactly, yeah. So it was very unique.
And I don't think that you or I would have turned out the way we did had we not had the opportunity to see what those kind of community, just having that kind of community to live in. I mean, I remember going to the library, just because I didn't have anything to do, and that's not, even back then, that wasn't kind of the average thing that people in our culture were doing. They weren't necessarily hanging out at the library, although I got called nerd and stuff like that too. But I didn't care, I got to. So, I mean, I think I say that to say that starting out well, or starting out with an awareness of culture, awareness of what's going on, and being given books to read to build that habit was pretty important. And we're finding that it's kind of a little bit harder these days to create the same kind of environment because, you've got cell phones, you've got, instant messaging, you have social networking being at the top of kids' attention pyramids right now.
Exactly.
And they're just not being educated the same way. So, to what you said, putting together some sort of creative outreach can't help but help. To expose kids, to give them a voice and say, you know what, you could make your own comic book. What do you mean? Well, you get somebody who can draw, you get somebody who can tell a story, the two of you work together or whatever, and you can create something that other people can see and other people may want to see.
Right.
And that's pretty powerful.
It is. Yeah, I think Churchill is doing something like that over in his area on the south side. He works with a core group of youth, I think through his studio, if I'm not mistaken. So, yes, I mean, the more the merrier. I mean, it needs to, I've always said to other people that whatever you do, you need to write a book.
Although there are a lot of people though who approach me and go, "Hey, you're an author. Could you help me write a book?"
Right.
And I go, "Okay, what do you want to write about?" "Well, I want to write my life story." And I go, "Well, what makes you think your life is interesting enough that we would do this and somebody would want to read about it?"
Right.
And so that again puts them on the track of figuring out, well, what's interesting. And then I say, well, what was the last book you read that you were excited about? And if they haven't read any, I go, well, shouldn't you be reading at least a book to see kind of what goes into it? And hopefully, like I said, hopefully we can start growing our own, our future audience.
Exactly. Yeah.
And keep the ball rolling.
It's very important.
We've got about 5 minutes left. If I were to ask you what was the hardest lesson that you had to learn where something went absolutely not the way you wanted it to go,
did you ever have something like that happen that you could tell the people who are going to be checking this out?
In terms of the publishing, or in terms of the writing?
In terms of writing and publishing, I mean, just a hard-earned lesson about the entire process.
Well, I think probably. I mean, I attempted a Kickstarter some time ago, which is how really my character really became very popular without the use of actually a book. The Kickstarter it failed in terms of that it wasn't successful, but it was a great success because it actually led me to licensing out to this kind of.
We just lost Ced. His phone cut out, or he got dropped. Hopefully he'll be back in a second. We only have a few minutes left anyway. I don't know if Jarvis is going to be able to break away from his class to check out to end the show. He's been pretty diligent about that, and I understand he's doing very well. Very, very soon, one of the things that we're going to do is we're going to have a show devoted to the Earth Squadron Project, which is a 3D animated movie that is a project for blacksci-fi project. That's what it is. It's based on something that Jarvis started writing a long time ago, and a lot of people have contributed to it. I was fortunate enough to be able to do a little bit of the script, and that's one of the things that we're going to be checking in with. And I think we're going to have a show with several people involved in the project and be able to talk about the whole project for the entire show, how it started, what the genesis of the entire idea was, and then the process of making it happen. And that's one of the things that I'm looking forward to, because not only do I get to moderate that, but I did have a little bit of a hand in the project. So that's something to look forward to, and as usual, we try to get as many different talented people as possible to guest on here and find out a little bit about who they are, where they are, how they got where they got, and the kind of work that they've been doing. Let's see. He's back on, but I think Jarvis. Okay, you're back. All right. So anyway, I was hoping you were going to get back. We only have a few minutes left anyway. But one of the things that I want to say is first of all, I want to thank you for being on, because it's great. And like I said, I had no idea you were, as they say, a hometown boy. And this is good. Well, I'm serious, because now we can start getting together.
Right.
Winter is great for that, because I'm not going to be outside in the winter. 2 winters ago, it almost killed me here in Chicago. I don't know about anybody else, but I'm definitely on the Danny Glover scale as far as those kind of winters are. I am definitely too old for that. Yeah. So that's worth looking forward to.
Absolutely.
We're down to we're about 2 minutes away. When we get back to BSFS, let's exchange phone numbers and what have you, so that we can get together, because I think we'd have some fun together. And isn't that ultimately, other than making some money, one of the cool things that we want to do in life?
Absolutely. Hey, listen, you have to enjoy it. Enjoy your art, enjoy your craft, enjoy your potential. And then if you can find some people that you could stand to be around, that makes it all worthwhile. That's it right there. That's so. Yeah. I don't know if Jarvis is going to be able to make it in. Like I said, he is doing his schoolwork, and he is probably still in class. So what I want to do, or maybe he's not in class, but what I want to do is I want to thank everybody who listens to this, who supports this podcast, who supports this show, and the people who have helped me learn so much more about science fiction, fantasy, horror, art, video, movies, short stories,
novels, all of the people who make this happen, and especially Jarvis, who put the whole thing together. Yeah, and I want to thank you for being here. You made my job easy. Let me ask you this: was that an easy phone call for you?
Oh, absolutely. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. Big fan of the Science Fiction Radio, Genesis Science Fiction Radio. Download the podcast all the time. Sometimes I don't have time to really tap into it to catch the podcast. Very informative, and I love the atmosphere and the energy you guys are giving out.
Well, thank you very much, man. I really appreciate it. So on behalf of the blacksciencefictionsociety.com website, and it looks like Jarvis is dialing in. Hopefully we can get him to give his last few words here. Give him a second to unmute. You there, man?
Hello.
Hey there.
Hey. Right on time.
Excellent.
Well, man, that was some real enlightening stuff that you had to say. And I'm tripping that you and Will are so close together. So, I just got in, and I want to thank everybody for participating on the show, whether you on the show, whether you hosted the show, whether you tuned in. Everybody involved is greatly appreciated. But Will does a great job, as always, in articulating the main points of each person that comes on the show. And I'm just glad you came on. Finally, I get to hear you for once.
That's it. Thank you. Hey, thanks for staying on me.
Yeah, I think. Hold on, you've been yes, we've been blessed. I think you've been a member like 4 or 5 years.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely.
It finally got you around to getting on the show. I bet Will, you don't know that I've been bugging him for about a year. Yeah, man. But I understand things happen, and
right.
Scheduling conflicts and stuff. But we got him on.
Absolutely.
And I'm excited about that mentoring thing that you're doing.
Oh,
and I think you and Will are cut from the same cloth.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Well, okay. I hate to break this up, but believe it or not, I got to walk down the street and go get some paper clips. I got a project here. Well, no, I'm building something. Yeah, but
you can walk past Ced's house.
Well, you know what? It's funny. He lives
not far.
He lives 8 blocks from me.
Right.
He's like at Addison and Damon, and I'm at Montrose and Damon, and that's 8 blocks away.
Okay, so you know what that means, right? You know what that means, right?
What is that?
You're gonna have to take him to lunch.
Oh yeah. We definitely have to go to lunch. Actually, if you'll come up this way, I'll take you to a place that I got to take James when he comes and visits town. They have a country breakfast to die for, man. You get the biscuits, the gravy, the chicken fried steak, all the stuff that's bad for you. So keep that in mind. We'll hook up.
Sounds good. Sounds like a plan.
I gained 5 pounds listening to that.
Oh, my goodness.
All right. Well, everybody have a pleasant rest of your weekend. I do hope everybody had a good time. I hope it was a great show. And again, remind your friends that this show is every Friday night, starts about 9 p.m. Eastern time. And try to get as many people to listen, and try to get people to join the site who might enjoy what we have to offer. So on that note, I'm going to wish everybody a good evening and a great show, and we'll catch you next time.
Thank you.
All right. I'm going to shut it down in about 30 seconds.
Okay. Hang on a second, Ced.
Hey.
Trigger happy on my button pushing.